Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Name the dog, Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in pints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks. We're two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, as always, is my man who loves to clickety-clack on a Commodore 64. It's Frank. How are you today?
Hang on. I'm just hacking into a weather satellite. I'm just going to make this winter weather go away real quick. So
Thank you.
Just hang on.
Thank you. Because computers can do anything, Frank. I don't know if you
That's
knew
the
that.
moral of this story.
Computers can do frickin' anything they want, and it's great.
And it's great until it's not.
Yeah, exactly. No, actually, they can't do anything. They cannot drink a beer, but you can. So please tell me what you were drinking this fine day.
Yeah, well done. I am drinking another Von Trapp beer. I've been drinking a few of these lately. Today I am enjoying the Helles Golden Lager.
Oh, yeah, I've had that one. That one.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a good one. Yeah, the Von Trapp.
Can you hold the can up for me? I actually want to see the logo for 1 second. It says Von. Does it say Von Trapp on the logo?
It does. Von Trapp Brewing.
It does say. Someone told me recently. I can't remember who it is. And by recently, I mean like this past week, that it's just the Trapp family lodge and not the Von Trapp family lodge because Von is a title and is not part of the family.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I believe that's true. I believe the Von is that's how they write a lot of German last names. It's sort of like I don't know, William of Aachen or whatever, you know? Like
Gotcha.
I think that's
William of Aachen. Nice.
Yeah. I was trying to think of another one, but yeah, that's what works. So yeah, it's like that. So it's, you know, it would be like if you're saying of Trapp, like you wouldn't say that, you would just say Trapp. But because we don't know German, we are all just going around saying Von Trapp. But yes, the brewery at least says Von Trapp. Von Trapp Brewing. I wonder if that's because they don't want it to sound like Trappist. Like if they just said Trapp Brewing.
Oh, probably. That would be a weird beer branding issue. What are the chances?
Yeah,
Truly.
but you are right that the lodge is just called the Trapp Family Lodge.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there you go.
There we go. 1, 2. There you go.
Yes.
It's so interesting. Okay. But good choice on the Trapp
Nice.
beer because
Nice.
it is good. And if you're drinking a Trappist beer, that would also be a good choice.
That would also be good. That would also be good.
Those
yes.
are good.
But
those
alas,
are great choices.
no, not today.
No. I am not drinking a Trapp beer. I am drinking something from the Great North Ale Works Company. I am drinking a black beer Russian Imperial Stout. It is a 10%, Frank.
I actually
10%.
just had some of those in my fridge a couple of weeks ago.
It is tasty.
It's
like really
good.
tasty. It is good, and it's cold here. I don't know if it's cold where you are, but it is cold as ice over here in where I live. So it's
Same
1,
here.
2, 3 Fake Street. Yeah,
Same here. Yes. 123 Sesame
yes.
Street.
123 Sesame Street, Minnesota. Yeah, so it's really good. Doesn't taste like a bear, which I'm happy about.
Yes, it's not made with bears.
Not made with bears or bear fur or anything like that, but it is that nice. It's that nice Imperial Stout, dark, like almost caramel.
Yeah.
Or like trying to think of a color equivalent actually. Like I used the wrong, like I colored the brown crayon too hard or something like that.
Sure. I know what you mean.
Yeah, you know, when the bits of the crayon come off on the paper and you're
Yep.
like, oh no, now it's a different texture than the rest of the paper.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that waxy sheen.
Yeah, exactly. The waxy sheen.
Yep. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. The Forgotten Sheen brother. as Emilio and Martin and Waxy.
Waxy. Not. He was Waxy Estevez for a while, but that was it. But then he came back around.
Oh, good for him. Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious.
When the whole Charlie Tiger Blood thing happened, he went back to Estevez.
He went back to. I'm back, baby. All right. Well, Frank, we are here again because we are potentially gluttons for punishment. We're here for another segment of Superhero Slapback, which is a whip sound, not a slap sound. But I can't make a slap sound without slapping something. And there's nothing near me except myself, so I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
Another episode of Superhero Slapback. We're here to talk about the I was going to say perennial, but that word does not actually make sense for what I'm about to say. We're here to talk about Superman 3. Now, Frank, this movie came out in 1983,
yes,
if I'm not mistaken, right? And yes, I did that without looking it up. I'm so happy.
Nice, good for you.
That information is in my brain. Starring Christopher Reeve and Richard Pryor, Margot Kidder for a hot second, and of course Annette O'Toole, later to be known as Martha Kent on Smallville. Little did they know when they cast her or asked her to be in the show, she was also Lana Lang.
Yeah.
So fun. Now, Frank, I had not seen Superman 3 since I was a kid. And when I mean a kid, I mean like a little kid.
Sure.
And so I think I saw Superman 3 before I saw Superman 1 or 2. This
wow.
might be my first Superman movie. Yeah. So it had been a time. And I also realized when I was watching it, I looked up a list of movies what other superhero movies came out, blah, 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 blah. And I realized that we actually should have watched Swamp Thing first.
Oh.
Wes Craven's Swamp Thing came out the year before Superman 3.
Oh, really? Okay, well, we'll have to rectify that and do that one next then. But
yeah, we'll have to go backward for Superman 3. But yeah, so Frank, when was the last time you watched Superman 3?
It's been a long time. It's been a long time for me too. I mean, this is maybe my third or fourth time seeing this movie. It's
okay.
It's been a while. I think whenever I got I remember watching all of them last. Whenever I got the DVDs or the Blu-rays, I don't even remember which one it was, but I got the set of either DVDs or Blu-rays. So I've had both at different times. So it's been maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 years since the last time I watched it. And I watched it as part of watching all 4 of the Christopher Reeve films. And I liked it more than I remembered this time around.
Too.
Yeah.
Me too. This is probably a I would say unpopular opinion. I think this is some of the best Clark Kent stuff in all 3 movies so far.
There is some really good Clark Kent stuff, and you know why it is?
Why?
It's because he's in Smallville and he doesn't have to be the bumbling, he doesn't need to go out of his way to make it look like, oh, that guy can't be Superman. He's just sort of being himself. He's sort of just being the Clark Kent that grew up in Smallville. And yeah, he gets a little bashful and nervous around Lana, but he's not making things fall and catch fire and everything all around him like he does sort of in the Daily Planet where he's just clumsy and bumbling to that extent.
Yeah, there actually is a noticeable difference between the Clark in the Daily Planet at the beginning of the movie with Lois and Perry and Jimmy, which I just love that they were all hanging out in Perry's office. That was some quality Daily Planet stuff going back and forth. Yeah. Where Lois is like, I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. And he's like, I would like to write a human interest story. And you're like, yeah, you would, Clark. This is good stuff. This is quality. Yeah, but you're right. He's not bumbling. He is to an extent.
To a degree, but not nearly. Like you said, there's a noticeable difference once he's on the Daily Planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so what else did you like about this movie? Let's actually start there before we tear anything apart, because I think it starts strong.
it has some stuff going for it. Here's sort of the thing that I realized about this film, and I started talking about some of this in our Superman 2 episode a few months ago. Richard Lester, who directed Superman, the second half of Superman 2 and this movie, great like comic film director, great comedic film director. And I think he came to this as comic book movie. Like it should be funny. It should be kind of slapsticky. It should be a little bit campy. There should be, jokes flying like every few minutes or sight gags or something. There should be comedy all throughout. And this was his chance to really do that, because Superman 2, he was sort of finishing someone else's movie, right? Superman 3, he was working on it to begin with. And I see now, I have a better appreciation of what he was going for. I think he made a decent comedy, 80s comedy movie.
Yeah, I agree.
This.
It's actually a really competent movie. Taking the Superman, is it a good Superman movie, or
that's
does it
a separate
showcase
question.
Superman well?
Yeah.
That's a separate question. But as a movie, it's well constructed. Things for the most part make sense. I find the characters engaging for the most part.
Yeah.
But yeah, not all of them. Some things there's odd decisions. Even to your point, he makes a comedy film. The opening credits of this movie is just weirdly slapstick.
It's just slapstick like hijinks the whole way through.
He kind of reminded me of A Hard Day's Night, or a Beatles, another Beatles film where it was just a little, or it's Three Stooges, or something along those lines.
He definitely pulled from his. In fact, there was a Beatles. So he directed A Hard Day's Night. He directed Help. And there was that. Did you notice that at the high school reunion, when they, at the beginning of the beginning of the scene at the high school reunion, they're all dancing to the Beatles. They're dancing to Roll Over Beethoven. Because it's class of 65.
Right, and I just, one, great, but two, you couldn't, the amount of money that you would spend to do that now, you would never, ever.
Yeah,
anyway,
they shelled out for that. But yes, I love that as a little Easter egg. But yeah, no, totally. It totally feels like A Hard Day's Night, or all that sort of, and a lot of sort of surrealist humor to it as well. The thing where the walk don't walk sign, sort of the two animated people come to life and start punching each other in the walk don't walk sign, right? And total surrealism, just being absurd for the sake of being absurd. And
we even the little penguin that's on fire,
the penguin
at the beginning in the opening credits,
right.
And he's and Clark just goes, and he just sends it back on its way, and just kind of continues to go about his day, doesn't question it. He's just this is my life.
Yeah, so absurd. So yeah, he definitely has a liking for that kind of humor, that sort of absurdist, silly sort of humor that doesn't even breaks the fourth wall or breaks the sort of reality of the story. But it's funny. It's meant to be funny. It's not meant to be taken seriously.
That's correct. But I didn't feel that I was supposed to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And so the opening credits set a really good tone.
That's
for me
it
in this film.
I think
and
he
was
he was setting
all right,
the tone.
this is the kind of movie that I'm going to watch. Okay, that's fine, because Superman is not as much as Batman, but he is a moldable character to a certain extent. Where it's a little tough in all respects, because of his background or his origins, or just the innate. He's not. With a dark character can also be played lightly, but a light character doesn't always play well darkly.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's maybe the difference between their adaptability. But this was very light for the most part, pretty much all the way through, and so I even the car that gets filled up with water, and Superman's I'm just gonna save this guy from drowning in his car in the middle of the street.
Right.
You're right. There's a lot of weird. That was it's almost like he's saving him from a Salvador Dali painting.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's just strange, funny circumstances. A lot of sort of just like one thing leads to another, and all these hijinks and it continue to ensue. It's like Metropolis is like one big Rube Goldberg machine in that opening.
Yes, yeah, I actually love the bit when he changes in the what do you call it, the photo booth.
Yes,
and
and
it's
he
got
rips the picture.
every picture of him changing. He rips it. He gives the Superman one to the kid. And keeps the rest. That's really funny.
Like there's some funny. If you watch this movie through the lens of like, does it look like a comic book of this time, of this era, of like the 70s and 80s? It kind of does.
Yep.
Like it really kind of, and really it's maybe more Silver Age than it is like Bronze Age, but still, like it is. You can see that he was inspired by like, oh, I'm gonna make a comic book movie that's gonna be like, it's gonna be silly, it's gonna be funny.
Yeah, emphasis on the comic.
And does it seem like he read very many Superman comics? No, not particularly. He didn't have any exposure to Superman. He was an American expat. He lived in Britain. He didn't really have exposure to Superman in the U.S. But he had a comedic sense and thought he could bring that to the film. And I don't think it works really as a Superman film, but I used to think it was a bad movie too. And now I don't feel that way anymore. I think it's not the best Superman movie, but it's not a bad movie through and through. Now there are things that, there are problems with it. The plot is convoluted
at best.
Yeah.
Yes. It actually doesn't start convoluted. I find that okay, so you have Richard Pryor, who I found really endearing through the course of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, he's just like a guy who, I don't know, gets stuck in his own way, like, or he's smarter than the people around him, but doesn't want to let people on, which actually is a nice juxtaposition to the blonde lady who's also smarter than everybody in the room, but doesn't let on. But it's stuff like that, like, well, why are you acting dumb?
Mm-hmm.
Like what are you gaining from acting like an idiot but actually reading Kant in your pastime?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I liked Richard Pryor. He gets caught up in this like Lex Luthor light scheme.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. That felt very much like a Lex Luthor character that Robert Vaughn was playing.
Yeah. I don't know if it feels that way particularly because we're used to Lex Luthor the businessman, but Lex Luthor the businessman didn't really exist at this time in Superman comics.
No, he didn't. It's true. And in fact, the early treatments or drafts of this movie had Brainiac as the villain, and that's where the computer aspect like stuck around.
Knew it.
And I think the idea was the Robert Vaughn character was going to be revealed to like actually be Brainiac in the end or something, or be working with him, like he was a host for Brainiac or something like that.
Why didn't they go with that?
I don't know.
Because that actually would have made more sense.
It would have. I feel like maybe they wanted to give it more of a. Gus Gorman, Richard Pryor, is the main character of this movie, and I think maybe they wanted to make it so that it wasn't so much a villain for Superman to be facing off against, and more of like bully that's troubling our main character, which is Gus Gorman. Because if you went with Brainiac as the villain, then Superman kind of has to be the main character. That would be my guess, is that when they decided to pivot to having Gus be the main character, they put less emphasis on it being a Superman villain from the comics.
I guess that makes sense, but I don't know. I think part of the issue with the story is that there's no redemption for Gus Gorman. He's exactly the same at the beginning as he is at the end.
It's true. And like Superman is just like, I like you, Gus. You're a good guy. You won't go to prison for the $86 million or whatever it was you embezzled. Like, right? Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna try and get you a job.
Yeah, that you don't accept.
That you don't accept.
I found funny, which I found funny, but that way, not miles that way. All right.
Okay. I guess I'll walk.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the film by the end grated on me. I think for that very reason, in which that, like, I was enjoying Gus, and I was enjoying Robert Vaughn and Clark Kent with Lana and all of this stuff. But by the end, I was like, so what's the point?
Yeah.
Because it actually really does like drop the ball on like all the points it's trying to make at the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
Because Clark's thing is, which he does kind of have this arc where he's like, all right, I'm going to go back to Smallville to write about like, can the small town guy return to the small town once he's been to the big city, which I really liked. That was like, that's a good human interest story. That's pretty cool. So he goes back to his high school reunion and he reconnects with Lana, who has a kid. Is it what's his name's kid?
No, the guy who keeps trying to ask her out or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. She mentioned that she was married. I think it's from her marriage.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it doesn't really clarify that. So
yeah. I think that guy he's just the high school quarterback who peaked. The guy who peaked in high school and is just feels entitled.
Never given that up.
Yeah, and feels entitled to have Lana because he wants Lana.
Gotcha. So Clark is like basically like it is the like, can I just be Clark Kent again argument,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Without ever really diving into that, and that's where it starts to pivot, because then when Robert Vaughn's character, whose name I just can't remember for the life of me, and Gus Gorman and whatever else in it, the sister, and they have this plan. They're like, oh well, Superman's going to stop us in like disrupting the world economy because of coffee or because reasons or whatever. We better kill him. And so they got some kryptonite, which is exactly the same kind of kryptonite that other people have used on him.
Yes.
But it does something different to him. I was like, that just feels like weak sauce. Like,
well,
change the color.
It did. It was different only because it was like synthetic, right? They made it with the computer.
Oh, I did not get that.
Okay.
I thought
the reason you might not have gotten it is because it's kind of a boring scene where Gus is literally sitting at the computer and he's typing in all the ingredients of like what they had found, like I don't know, all the elements that they found whenever they at the Addis Ababa site when they found all the kryptonite. So he's typing into the computer, oh, it's 5% zinc and 3% copper, blah 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 blah, and there was like 1% of some element that was unknown, and so Gus just took a guess and threw tar in there.
Oh.
And that's what made the kryptonite behave differently, because it was synthetic and they were missing one ingredient.
Yeah, I definitely did miss that.
Yeah,
I missed that bit, but that's okay.
It's one of those things that like if you're watching it at home, it's easy to tune out because it's kind of boring. It's just Gus typing into a computer again.
Right. So, but what it does, it's basically red kryptonite, right?
Essentially, as we know it now, or black,
right. depending on comic or Smallville, or Smallville retcon or whatever. So it gives Superman, it takes away Superman's moral compass.
Yep,
I guess. And it also gives him a tan and turns his costume a darker color.
His costume's like a shade darker.
Which is funny because I was looking at the costume, I'm like, that's just the Superman Returns color palette.
Yeah, pretty much, yes.
But in this movie, it's evil Superman.
Yes,
which I found kind of amusing.
That is kind of funny, yeah.
Yeah, I actually really like the costume in this movie. There's like it's a different color. It's more vibrant, and I really like it.
Is bigger too, I think, right?
It is bigger.
Yeah, I like this costume.
I like it a lot. I didn't know that it was different. When I was watching it for God, how many times was I watching it? How many years?
Sure.
Hence, but I really like it. But anyway, so it takes away his moral compass, and that's where the movie really starts to lose me, because like, what is he's like, he goes halfway between like prankster and sexual deviant.
Yep.
And I'm like, what a weird line to draw.
He's just kind of a jerk, and yes, and then
the 80s.
But then you're right. Verging on sex criminal. So like it's
twice.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just so like because then at the end where she's like Superman,
Yeah,
and he's like that wasn't me. I'm like, but it was.
But it was you.
And so you're just throwing that off.
Yeah,
like you're like it wasn't me. I'm sorry, baby.
That's it. Like no consequences to your actions. That's just it. Because that's kind of what villains
and I mean
do.
but right, but like what are the consequences to it? Like because like was it really him? Like did he have control? It's all very ambiguous. But then like so like when then like the surrealist nature again of like Clark Kent like separates from Superman and they have this battle in the junkyard. What doesn't make sense to me is that he murders Clark Kent, kills Superman.
Yes.
Right? Okay,
yes.
but even though he's separated from that body, so it's Clark Kent that's like the astral form or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Then he kills Superman, and then he rips open his shirt to reveal the Superman costume underneath. And I'm like, but you just murdered the Superman that was wearing the costume.
He reabsorbed him. But they didn't visualize it. They didn't show it.
No, they didn't. But they visualized the separation, but they didn't visualize the reabsorption.
Yes, that's right.
It's like you dropped the ball on the visual.
I agree.
Like, through line.
I agree. This plot, this subplot reminds me very much of. Have you ever seen the Star Trek original series episode where Captain Kirk goes through the transporter? There's a transporter malfunction, and he gets split into two Kirks, and he has to fight himself.
Oh yes, yes.
It very much reminds me of that. You got the evil Kirk and the good Kirk, and then they have to go through the transporter again to be re-merged into one.
Which is a very Silver Age comic thing to do. So, like, you're right, and like this is pure Silver Age, but it's because it's the 80s, it now has that sexy 80s thing to it, where like he's not just a prankster, because that's what he would be in the Silver Age. He's like, he destroyed my favorite glass with a peanut.
Yeah.
That,
right,
you know,
right.
like, right. But he's also like, but I also have to sex up to this woman.
Right.
Like, that's kind of, you know,
right.
Or he has to straighten the Tower of Pisa.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what that one's about.
Blowing out the Olympic
torch.
One of the best bits of the movie. I actually really do think that best bit in the movie was the Italian vendor who like destroys his piece, gets all new ones. Superman moves it back, and he's like hits the guy with the broom.
Yep.
That bit was great.
That's like pure Dick Lester right there. That's right out of a Beatles movie too. Like that's we're gonna have this dumb gag, and then it's gonna come back around at the end, and we're gonna do it again, like in reverse, like the same. Yes. Oh, it is such a classic like Richard Lester comedy beat. But but he is just sort of, remember the episode, the website superdickery.com where it's just pictures of like from the Silver Age of Superman, you know, running around being a jerk to people for no particular reason. It's basically that for a big chunk of this movie.
Yeah, but I think part of the problem is that so the first bit of the first act or two of the movie is setting up like, can the big city man, the man of tomorrow, go back to his hometown and make it work between being Superman and Clark? But it doesn't separate Clark and Superman. It gives us a morally ambiguous Superman, and that doesn't fly with what was it's setting up before. And then it just is done with that. It's just like they reabsorb, and that's it. Like.
That's it.
What a weird little adventure I just had.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a lot of substance to it. There could be so much more about the like, wow, like the good side and the bad side were split, but then the good side had to defeat the bad side in order for them to be reabsorbed. Like you could have made more out of that, but it's really just like we need an action scene, and we don't really have a villain for him to punch yet until later. So for now, he's just going to fight with himself. Like, wouldn't that be a spectacle?
Yeah, not really.
No. It turns out
it's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's about as exciting as Gus typing things into the computer. Yeah.
They just, the junkyard set piece. They had their heart set on that, and it was.
They did.
They
did. Yeah. So that's where it really starts to lose. And then by the end, you have this like big supercomputer that they're gonna do something with, because supercomputers. Like it's just like it really doesn't like start on like a COM 64 and then or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it like transforms into this like, I would say almost reaction to Star Wars.
I would say almost reaction to Bond films. to Roger Moore Bond
Yeah, that's
era.
better. Yeah, which is actually a reaction to Star Wars.
Yes, that's right.
Right? Yeah, because Moonraker, the whole reason Bond really does his Moonraker thing with space lasers is because of Star Wars.
It's because of Star Wars, right?
But then
they made Moonraker faster because they wanted to cash in on the Star Wars craze, right? Like,
right.
But I feel like that's where they were looking at further inspiration.
I think you're totally right. It's total Bond villain lair thing.
Yeah.
It is kind of apart from Gus and Superman, it's basically a Bond villain's plan.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I'm going to disrupt the world economy with this computer that can do anything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it reminds me of, like, in the 90s or the late 90s, 2000s when, like, it's the internet. The internet can do anything.
Yes.
Let me just hack into this thing and this thing with the internet.
The Deus Ex Machina was the internet. In this case, the Deus Ex Machina is just computers, period.
Just computers.
And
just computers.
Again, there were moments where I could kind of see what they were getting at. Like, oh, okay. It's public knowledge that computers now control control traffic patterns and control weapons and control hydroelectric power and all these things. So what if we show all the things that can go haywire when we try to hack a weather satellite that we accidentally are also hacking the traffic patterns and done in a comedic absurdist way, but I see what they were getting at from sort of a layman's view of not understanding really how computers work, but just knowing they control all these things in our society. The very, very simplistic idea of, well, what if a bad person went to use a computer and made all those things go haywire?
Right.
Like, that's really as complex as it gets.
It's funny because there's actually like a really nice charm to that idea while watching the movie. Like, you're like, oh, a simpler time, just when you would think typing on a computer would do these things. Like, it feels almost nice to watch. Because like they're so simple in their ways.
It's so innocent. It's so like really kind
innocent.
of naive, like that was the worst they could think of.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
They're like, that's it. That's all I've got. Like, just type in the computer.
Yeah.
This unwitting guy. But anyway, so we get to the end, and it's like a bit of a video game, right? Too, where they're like, you got to shoot him with the missiles and all that stuff. And then we get what is probably the most horrifying thing to ever grace a comic book movie of any kind. And the sister transforms into some kind of living technological zombie thing because the computer's alive for a reason that we're not really sure of, and it wants something. But that's where you said this script had Brainiac in it originally. I was like, this is it. This is Brainiac.
This is Brainiac. Yeah, you can see where they just sort of changed names on the page.
Yeah,
but kept the
they
story
just
the
took
same.
Brainiac out, but kept it out. And I was because I was like, if this was Brainiac, like even if you said to me the computer was Brainiac, and this woman became his host, and this was the end of the I'm like, this makes sense because I at least now have a conception that Brainiac is alive,
right?
Or is at least an AI that has these capabilities, and you just didn't mention that at all.
If this was a 90s movie, like 90s, early 2000s movie, Gus would have, when he gave the blueprints, quote unquote blueprints on the back of the napkins and whatever, he would have had a backronym for Brainiac and what it stood for, right?
Oh, yes.
Like, you would have had that on his napkin, and they would have probably mentioned it once and maybe not talked about it again, or maybe they'd say it again, I don't know. But, like, he would have called it Brainiac, and it would have been some, like, weird acronym for why it spells out
You're
Brainiac.
Right. Big robot intelligence.
Yeah,
right.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, man. Or it'd be like, biological, robotic, intelligent, something. Yep, exactly.
Yes.
No, just Brainiac.
Yep.
Just don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
So, but then it just feels kind of unresolved by the end because, that's it. Like, Gus gets away with it. I guess other people die or go to prison probably. And Superman gets trapped in a cellophane bubble, which I think is like...
Yes.
I think it's justice for trapping Non in a cellophane S and killing him.
Okay. Sure. But we, at the end of the movie, see him fly to space and wave to the camera and smile and circle the Earth. And he's not breathing there either. But when you put him in a cellophane bubble, all of a sudden not being able to breathe is a huge problem.
Oh my God, that's such a good point. Oh my God. Wow. I didn't even think. I was not thinking. That's so good. Oh man.
Like in the next movie, he's gonna go to the moon. Like the same thing. Like
he's just toying with him. He's just being a dick. He's just messing with him. He's actually fine.
I guess.
He's
I just
like, gotta make it fun for the kids.
I couldn't help but notice that one. I was like, come on, guys, that's just lazy.
So funny. That is lazy. Wow, that's so lazy.
Yeah.
At that point, I was just kind of like, I was in it to win it at that point.
Yeah. You're just like, all right, this can end anytime now. Like this movie could have been a half hour shorter. This absolutely could have been a half hour shorter.
It's not even long though.
No, it's only 2 hours.
Just a 2-hour movie.
Yeah. But if you took out the whole split Superman thing, because they didn't commit to that, right? Like you said, they didn't commit to having him split and having that be like an actual story to tell and all of that. So.
No, because the story of like, can the small town man go back to and survive or whatever? Like, you didn't finish that story.
No, they didn't.
I mean, I guess they did that. Like Lana now works at the Daily Planet, which is not mentioned in Superman 4, if I remember correctly.
No, it is not. No, it is absolutely not.
But like, I guess that's a thing. So I guess like the small town man brings his small town back to the big city with him.
And then he gives her a giant diamond, but they're not actually engaged. So
very confusing,
right?
Yes, because he's like, "Sorry, I took your ring," and I was like, "Did you do that?" Like, I don't remember that actually. But. Was I not paying attention?
She said she had to pawn her ring to
That's
pay the
right.
bills.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So, I do think that Lois was peak Lois here, though.
Lois was peak
for,
Lois.
Like the 2 scenes she was in, she's like, I would go to Aruba or whatever and come back with a story about like
corruption in the Caribbean.
Corruption in the Caribbean. Yeah.
She was. I liked her more in the like 10 lines she had in this movie, and I'm like
same.
And it's not because, to be clear, I'm not saying I liked her because there was little of her. I liked her, and I wish there was more of her like that. I wish we saw more of that version of her, like in Superman 2 and in Superman 1. Like, and I agree. I wish that there had been more of sort of that version of Lois who was. It's because she wasn't being like putting Clark down, and she was like, I don't know. I just didn't.
Yep. Nope. I agree. She was wholly competent, and she was wholly competent. She was funny, witty. She owned the room, but she didn't put anybody down while doing it. It was like a really well written Lois, and I'm kind of bummed that we only saw her for those 2 scenes.
I mean, it was like what, 5 minutes of screen time?
Maybe if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah. So that's that. And I did enjoy the running gag of the bingo machine.
Oh, yes.
Like the balls to the computer and all that, like changing it over. I thought that was all
that was
all
funny.
Cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also struck me how tall and large Christopher Reeve was in this movie. Some of the ways that he was shot. I'm like, you're really big.
He's a big
you're not
man.
Just like big. You're like really big. Because he's definitely more muscular here than he was in the first one. You know how he just kept putting on muscle, and he's just like really like imposing.
Yes.
And I wish that he actually had like gone up against something that was worth his physical bulk.
I know. You know who his trainer was? David Prowse.
Yeah, Dave Prowse.
Yeah.
Darth Vader himself.
Vader. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I did know that. So, yeah. But so anyway, 2.5 out of 5. So
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Honestly, I probably would have rated it the same, based off of my memory of it, but for different reasons. I would have said that I didn't think that it was very funny, that I didn't think it was that it made much sense. I still don't think it makes a ton of sense, but it's funnier than I remembered. Richard Pryor is given a lot of time to just sort of vamp and improv, and there's that whole thing where he comes in and he pretends to be the general or whatever, and I came in from the Pentagon, and he's improving for the crowd, and it's I don't know that he was the best improv comedian, because there's sometimes where he's just repeating the same thing over and over again, and I think it's supposed to be funny, but it's not really coming off as funny. So his stuff is like hit or miss. I feel like they gave him a lot of room to like, all right, just like do your thing, man. Like the other actors are just gonna like riff with you, except they didn't really riff. They just sort of stared at him and let him sink or swim.
Right.
So maybe
Which
it's not
actually-
even that he wasn't very good at improv. Maybe he just didn't have good scene partners.
Maybe, but I also found that him like kind of doing that and no one responding to him like separated him from the group, which kind of like added to his character as an outsider.
That's
and
right,
not really
yeah.
going with the flow. So I thought it worked.
And for me, it kind of added to the absurdness of like he's like in a different movie, and the rest of them are like on a comic book page, like very cookie cutter, and he's like in a completely different like planet from the rest of them.
He is, but I think he is one of the most. I think he is the most fun to watch when he's on screen because like he's clearly doing his thing.
He's doing his thing,
high or not.
Yeah.
So
it's a very different thing for him compared to his other material, but like it's better than I remembered. It's a better comedy movie than I remembered. It's just not a very good Superman movie, but like putting that aside, it's got redeeming qualities. It just, okay, here's my question for you. What superhero movie should Richard Lester have taken on in this time period? Like, what superhero fits his style? I'm like Wally West. I'm like, if there was like the right Green Lantern could be a good fit for him. Although maybe that's a little too detached from Earth. But like he could have done a really good like comedic take on another superhero, and I probably would not have an issue with it if it weren't Superman. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's too bad that it's
maybe Shazam.
Yeah, actually, Shazam would be a good one. My first thought was Justice League International, but that's like I think it's a couple years later. It came out in '87, which is my one look up because I definitely did not remember that.
Okay, fair enough.
But like there was like the Booster Gold Blue Beetle like kind of comedy duo spoof that's what I felt like Richard Lester would be good at that. Like that dynamic.
Sure.
So, but in the 80s before that,
that's the thing. Like, because I can think of characters, but some characters didn't exist yet. But yeah, I think Booster Gold, he'd be all over that kind of humor. Like, I think that's the kind of thing where he would really thrive. Is it the kind of thing that would have drawn box office in the early 80s? No. But just what would he be a better fit for? I think that's right. I think that's a better answer.
Maybe. Yeah, that's going to be my answer. I think I'm going to keep it there. Yeah, because it doesn't have to be gold. It has to be blue and gold.
Hey, there you go.
Hey, yeah, that's where I'm going to land.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, I like that. That's good.
Yeah. Well, Frank, this was a good conversation, but I would like to introduce you to a new segment that we are starting at the end of every episode, or just about. I have officially decided to read up the podcast where we talk about books intellectually and stuff, and we're going to fold that into Beer with Geeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of most Beer with Geeks episodes, if I have something to talk about, we're going to talk about it here, and I actually do have one this week, otherwise I wouldn't be mentioning it, and it is actually thematically appropriate, which is not what's always going to happen, but I recently, it's going to be audiobooks, prose novels, poetry books, graphic novels, whatever I just happen to go through. This one is a graphic novel, and I finished Robert Venditti's and Wilfredo Torres's Superman 78.
Nice.
And so I actually just finished it yesterday, so this is like a good quality time. And this takes place between Superman 1 and 2, I believe, if not just after Superman 2. And the villain is Brainiac, so I thought that was weirdly appropriate.
Oh, wow.
That we were talking about, was almost Brainiac. So it's like a in-universe, like this is the in-between adventures, and Lois and Lex and Superman and Perry and Jimmy and everyone's back, and it was good time. It was like unadulterated budget, but like, you know, like what would the Brainiac of 1978 look like, and what would he do?
Yeah.
And who would he be? And like who would be? Oh my gosh, who would be cast as him?
Yeah.
In that era. So he looks like Yul Brenner, actually.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, he looks like Yul Brenner, which would be good casting. Yul Brenner would be a good Brainiac. So, but that's very cool. The Bottle City of Kandor's in there.
Nice.
So obvious, and so like there's some really cool surprises, some nice gags, which I wouldn't get. Like, so I just watched Superman 3, and then I finished reading this book. And in one of the panels in Perry's office is the bingo machine.
Oh, nice!
Like stuff in the corner.
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, so it's really fun, and you know, Gene Hackman is, you know, obviously back as Lex,
sure,
in here, and he's wearing his purple and his green, so you get some of the stuff that
cool.
you wouldn't get from you didn't get from the movies, but you got here. So I do recommend 4 out of 5 stars. It was a really fun time.
That does sound really good. Yeah.
So
how many issues is it?
6 issues.
Oh yeah, okay, that's easy.
One graphic novel. Yeah, so easy reading. But that's my read up for this week.
Fantastic. Good recommendation. Well, you can find more shows that feature Tim talking about things he likes over at thoughtbubbleaudio.com. You can support us at patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio. For any dollar amount, helps us keep the lights on, keep making shows, keep paying the bills. You can also contact us at beerwithgeeks@gmail.com. And if you want to rate and review us in your favorite podcast app where you're hearing us right now, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon or any of the great podcast apps. I like Overcast personally, but hey, you pick the app you like. And if they have ratings and reviews, as Apple Podcasts and Spotify both do, it'd be awesome if you could leave us a star rating or write out a little review. That helps us tremendously to get the show discovered by more and more people all the time. New people finding Beer with Geeks all the time. So head on over to those apps to do that. But yeah, that's it for us for this week, Tim. Good times, good talk about Superman 3. We sure did a superhero slapback.
We sure did, Frank. I don't know why I paused there. So I was slap. And so, well, it's a pleasure to talk to you. And so, until next time, cheers.